I guess we didn't have a good breakfast. I didn't hear good morning from we all. Good morning. Thank you. Well, as Vishal said in the initial that, we have structured this session to accommodate that all the speakers get enough time and we can take the question answer to this. And I'm quickly going to walk through the presentation which I have. I believe that most of you would be aware of this scenario. Sometime in March 1876, when Alexander Bell, working on the invention or the development of this telephone, at that time he accidentally spilled the battery acid on his hands. While his assistant was working in the lab in another room, he shouted, "Mr. Watson, come here, I really want you." Mr. Watson didn't hear his sound. Mr. Watson heard him over the line, over the phone line, over the wire. So this was the first phone call. This was the first call that was made for the medical assistance. So teletriage was there for last 135 years. So it's not new. The technology enabled us 135 years back. We had the technology, but did we really use it? I believe that if we had the technology, then we wouldn't be here. You would have seen this statistical data for last 25 years. You would have seen it while comparing some of the parameters between the developing and the developed nation. We in India still lags behind, not in comparison with the developed world, but with many of the developing countries. Why didn't we use the telehealth? We had the technology available to all of us. So just quickly giving you a glimpse of, this is a comparison between the India, Sri Lanka, and US. And within India, if I look the rural and urban divide, why do we have divide? Why do we have this in spite of having this telehealth? I just want to ask the respected, the intelligent delegates here, how many of you believe that we could address this problem by telehealth? A lot of hands, so I believe that we were on the right track. But in spite of this technology available to us, and the reason which I felt, we looked more into the traditional solution, and the traditional solutions had their own drawbacks. The traditional solution could not reach to all the areas, like having the 600,000 villages. We could not have the doctors in every village. The scalability and the speed, if I look at, the speed at which we are working using this traditional solution, it would be next 15, 20 years before we could even meet the Millennium Development Goal for under 5 mortality. So how do we address this? So this is the new kid on the block. Everybody has talking about the mobile phone, having 5.3 billion subscribers, having 900 million phones. And this is the first serious attempt which I'm seeing in past 5 years, that now the companies are really investing in this area and making it really work. Either it's a teleclinic or a telemedicine or a telehealth or any component of the healthcare that can be delivered using this ICTPs. And just to show you, this is what I have here to share with you all. This is the Mediphone. This is a service we launched on March 9th as a pilot initially in one of the state of northern India, Haryana. And if I tell you the number of calls that we received for this on day 1, just imagine, I got 28,500 calls on day 1. And when I looked at the session of this basically discussion, this telehealth 2.0, the way Mr. God translated this 2.0 on the accessibility and affordability, I translated it in a little different way. For me, 1.0 was the pilot and 2.0 was beyond pilot. So I'm going to walk you through the pilot and the beyond pilot. So this Mediphone is a service which we launched on March 9th and partnership with the largest telecom provider in India, Airtel. And any one of you who has the Airtel mobile number can make the call to this 54445. And you can get a chance to talk to the qualified nurses. The nurses can register you, get all your clinical history, take all the symptoms, and by using the decision support tool, can reach a differential diagnosis where an adequate, proper advice can be given, which could be a home remedy, which could be a prescription, which could be over-the-counter medication. So this is talking some of the statistical data of the pilot. We launched in Haryana, as I said, and this data can be interpreted in any way. I'm sharing only some of the data of the pilot just to showcase, just to tell you like, okay, how this service is currently working and how much it can be scaled. Out of the total number of calls which we got, 95% of the calls were for the triage service and only 5% of the calls were for the health information or the kind of complaints which could be addressed by home remedies. Out of this total call, this 84% of the calls were made by the male callers. It shows that still that male dominancy for decision making in the house. And 16 to 35 years was the target group, or I would say like was the age group from where we receive about 68% of the total number of calls. Although we got calls from like 55, 60, 70 old people, but majority of the calls were from the 16 to 35 years. And we continued this pilot till 31st of July. Almost 5 months we did this pilot. And at the same time, we were dissecting this data just to understand what, because this is a commercial service. This is a paid service. This is not a government project. This is a project in partnership between two large groups, the Religate groups, which owns one of the largest chain in the hospitals in Asia, having 66 hospitals. Okay. And so this is the kind of data we had in the pilot and before the pilot, and we finally launched the beyond, the second phase where we moved beyond pilot. It was August 1st, and this is some of the data from the pilot after, second phase, I would say like this 2.0 phase, where most of the data statistical point still points the same thing, shows the same thing, the total number of calls on the triage, 84% of the triage and some of the health information call. And the disease pattern, that was kind of unique. If you look at the disease pattern for which we received all these calls, most of the calls which we received, they are for the general practitioners, like the call that can easily be addressed over the phone using a decision support tool. And I just want to share this last slide quickly. The reason which we believe, though there are several players who tried attempting doing the similar service, and there are many players who are still doing this, but the reason which I believed that made us moved into this 2.0 phase was this credible partner. The partners which we had in this, Medibank, erstwhile known as McKesson Asia Pac, and Airtel, the largest telecom provider. The platform which we are using is a credible platform, been in use for last 18 years in Australia, New Zealand, US, and several countries. The established protocol being developed by senior doctors all over the world in last 20 years. And these caring people, we have the right processes which we used, and a commitment from the promoter. That's one of the biggest support we had in taking it to phase 2. So we are not the only one who feel that, we succeeded. There are some more stories where people tried it all over the world, and the telehealth is really going into 2.0 and it's running fast. I'll really quickly conclude it here because just need to respect Mr. Vishal and so that other speaker can also get the time. So if there's any question, we'll take, I guess, after the session.